the biggest disservice a professional can do for a disabled child is to set low expectations. My very first IEP meeting with my daughter, they asked me what my goal was. She was in second grade at this point, and I'm like, well, everybody in my family has gone to college, she will go to college too. And the principal's response was, well, you can't know that. College is hard for people who are deaf.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the WCAT podcast. Today, we are doing a brew, which is where we get to interview someone in the accessibility space. And today, I have the awesome privilege of introducing Sheri Byrne-Haber, who has been in accessibility for quite a while. Sheri, would you like to introduce yourselves to our guests?
Sure. So I'm on my third career at this point. So quite a while, if you include my work in inclusion for the deaf, is close to 20 years. I am on the WCAG working group for defining what the next standards are going to be. I co-lead the maturity model group. I have a book coming out on May 6th where I was one of the authors that I'm going to talk about today. And yeah, I'm working with Accessibility Officer as their director of strategy projects.
Awesome. Yeah, Sheri has been an awesome help to us at Accessibility Officer. Love picking her brain about digital accessibility and even just beyond that to things like, hey, what are other companies like so that we can improve our own methodologies? Sheri, would you just quickly go over some of the things you do here at Accessibility Officer before we dive into a little more about the woman behind the myth and the legend?
Kind of doing a little bit of everything right now. Jane of all trades of sorts. So
I've never heard that before.
I actually, well, I'm not, can't be a jack of all trades, so I'm a Jane of all trades. Um, I initially came on board in a training role. So I was going to be doing a lot of accessibility officers training, and I found that I was just super aligned with Tanner in terms of his mission. I love the CAT program. And so I ended up expanding into other areas. So I'm helping develop internal policy, like doing, even human resources kinds of things for helping a small company grow to the next step. I write blogs every week. So I do a lot of very detailed Title II focused writing that I try to write on stuff that people haven't written on before. So this week's blog, for example, is how do you make body worn camera footage in police investigations accessible? When do you have to do it? How do you do it? Etc. It's not something anybody's ever talked about. So I
Mhm.
decided to bring my thoughts forward on how to change internal policies in order to account for accessibility requirements.
I absolutely love that. And I think we can definitely put that link up somewhere within our podcast because that blog post sounds like something that anyone who is interested in the goings on of today's world would be interested in reading. So,
I would
Yeah,
like to think so.
her blog is great. I've read a lot of posts on it, and you definitely hit a lot of different topics that people don't always talk about. Some of them are things that people would like to avoid talking about, but that just means that we absolutely have to give a voice to them. And you're definitely doing a great job with that.
Well, you know what? We don't need another blog on how to write alt text.
No.
We need blogs on how to take current and evolving situations, especially with AI, and apply accessibility, sensibilities to those
Mhm.
topics.
While I have you here, and speaking of AI, I think it's a great transition. I kind of want to just get your perspective because I have my own thoughts, and so I just love to see where your brain is. How do you see AI affecting the digital accessibility space in about 5 to 10 years?
I'm not even sure we can foresee out 5 to 10 months, much less 5 to 10 years.
I
The
guess
field is the field is moving so quickly. I think right now, it, people are trying to fail fast with AI. They're not focusing on regulatory requirements. They're not focusing on accessibility. It's like the bad old days of the dot-coms when, for example, Uber and Lyft were just getting started. And it was, oh my God, we have to be out with the next best feature. And, a feature helmet on where the only thing that made it out was features, and you just kept on accruing accessibility debt and UX debt and analytics debt because those things are boring and they weren't getting dealt with. So, I mean, I would like to hope that the LLMs will get caught up on the right way to do accessibility. Today we are still at a place where I can feed an LLM an article and I can ask it to write a conclusion, and 50% of the time it will include the word blind spot. Or, it will use non-inclusive language. And that's because it's been trained on the content of the internet, and the content of the internet is non-inclusive. So I think it's going to take a long time to make that shift. I don't know if it's going to take 5 years. It may take 5 years only because the LLMs are probably focused on features and don't think that inclusion is too terribly important.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about? Oh, sorry, B.
No, go ahead.
What do you think about? So I have had a person in my life who is very against the use of AI in workplace because they think that AI is basically going to take over everybody's jobs. What are your thoughts on that? Because right now we're kind of in the world of generative AI versus the AGI that is up and coming. And basically, when I had told this person that I use AI every day in my work, they basically told me that I am facilitating the process that's going to lead to my own obscurity, that basically within the next few years that there's not going to be a need for digital accessibility testing by a human because it's all going to be able to be done by AI. I have my own thoughts, but I'm curious about yours.
Yeah, so my thoughts are this is an exact repeat of where the word sabotage was derived from. And sabotage came from, I think it was Dutch machine workers who threw their wooden shoes into the equipment to break it because they were afraid that their artistic skills were going to be replaced by machines. It literally no different right now, except it's digital material and not a physical machine. Oh, the shoes were called sabot. That's where the word sabotage comes from. Anyways, I think
you're so smart.
I'm sorry?
I said you're so smart. I just knowing that off the top of your head is just astounding to me.
I got a garbage can collection of facts in my brain. Anyways, reacting based out of fear is not a strategy. That would be the first thing that I would tell your friend, being that, the blunt and very direct person that I am. I think if people have ethical concerns, if they have intellectual property concerns, that's a little bit different. But saying we shouldn't use it because it's going to replace us, that just doesn't make sense with me, because I feel that we will move on to different things that AI can't do. Accessibility is all about context. And right now, that's the one thing that AI absolutely sucks at, is context. Mm-hmm. So it's one step better than the automated tests, but we didn't go from 35% coverage to 100% coverage overnight just because we got generative AI. I think that's going to creep up slowly over time, and we move on to other things. We move on to things that we're not testing right now, like switch testing and voice-activated testing and UX integration and personalization and customization. There's so many things that we could do to improve the experience for people with disabilities that AI isn't going to be able to help us with, I don't think, in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, awesome. I could not agree more. Like, it's a tool, right? It behooves you to use it because it's here regardless of whether we choose to or not.
And you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. I mean, if you've got 2 employees and one's more efficient than the other because they're making legitimate use of AI within the confines of what their employer allows, guess who's going to be rated higher?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
And then just going off a little bit of a tangent, can you kind of just tell a little bit about how you got into the digital accessibility space?
I think this is a fairly well-known story by now, but I'll tell it anyways.
Yeah.
So I got a degree in computer science, but first of all, I should say I was born with spina bifida, so I have a pretty bad spinal curvature, and I also was born with club feet, and so I've had mobility challenges, pretty much my entire life. I've had 24 surgeries at this point. I went into computer science, did that for about 10 years. At the end of my first decade in software testing, which was the field that I specifically went into, I was a director of software testing for E-Trade. I got asked to testify in court as an expert witness in software testing. And I realized that the software people didn't understand the law, the lawyers didn't understand the software, and there might be a good business that for somebody who could speak both languages. And so I ended up going to law school thinking that I was going to do intellectual property and I was going to be a hotshot patent attorney at Wilson Sonsini. And my third year of law school, like literally, I want to say 2 months, maybe 10 weeks before I graduated, we discovered that my daughter was losing her hearing. And so I made a pretty sharp pivot at that point. Instead of going to intellectual property, I went into advocacy for the deaf because I felt like, she got everything that she needed because I was a mom that would not take no for an answer, either from the school districts or her medical providers. And so that's what I did for about 7 years. I worked for a nonprofit, and we went after school districts and insurance companies that refused to provide deaf students or deaf patients what they were legally entitled to. I won a class action lawsuit against Blue Cross for failure to provide cochlear implants. I convinced United Healthcare to start covering hearing aids. And then pretty much I kind of put myself out of business because we weren't, our case log, went down to like 10% of the number of cases that we were getting previously. And it wasn't a profit center to begin with because it was a nonprofit. But I thought, okay, this is career 2 kind of, closing the door on it. I've got a degree in computer science. I'm a lawyer. I picked up an MBA along the way, so I've got a pretty solid business background. My father was an early entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, so, super familiar with startups. What should I do? And that was right when digital accessibility was starting to become popular. And so I ended up shifting there and haven't looked back. I don't think there's going to be a career 4. I think I'll finish up here.
I want to touch on something you mentioned. Yeah, Ellie and I, we're both blind parents, and actually, do you want to talk about this since you have more experience with this than I do?
So, like, one area where I feel like I can really connect with you is the fact that we are people who have visible disabilities, and we both ended up having children who have disabilities as well. And in your case, it's a different disability than what you have. In my case, they have the same disability I have, manifesting in different ways, and then additional disabilities that I don't have. And it's really kind of a unique perspective because we have our lived experience as someone who is part of a marginalized demographic, a minority, and knowing our needs very well and the needs of disabled people in general, and having to go into these spaces where people or professionals, in some cases, think that they know better about what our children need than what we need. And it's really just kind of an interesting place to be because you're between those two worlds and you're having to use your lived experience to advocate for your children.
Yeah, I think lived experience doesn't get nearly enough credit with professionals that require, graduate degrees or whatever for what they're contributing to the process. Before lived experience, we used to call it the School of Hard Knocks, where, basically you learned as part of a boxing of sorts and figured things out from there. I think 100% the most important thing a parent of a disabled child can do, regardless of whether the parent has a disability, is to teach the children how to advocate for themselves. My very proudest moment as a mom was not when my deaf daughter graduated from audiology school. It was when she told me after the fact, oh, I got discriminated against in school in this way, and here's what I did about it, and here's how I overcame that problem. And she did all of that. This was, she was in her early 20s at that point, but she had done all of that without talking to me. She was talking about it after, like it was a done deal. And that really, I mean, even today, it still gets to me a little bit. That's what I go back to when I think, okay, I actually did a halfway decent job.
I absolutely agree. There's a couple of posts that are circulating around on Facebook right now in the blindness community that are basically theorizing why our unemployment rate is so high. One of them calls out the fact that people themselves kind of get worn down by all of the discrimination that goes on, and they themselves kind of choose to check out after a certain point. Like they get so discouraged that they stop trying, and that we need to not allow that to happen. The other one says, more so blames it on vocational rehab counselors and training programs, not exactly knowing what the needs of the client are, and that they're suggesting things, or they're authorizing things, or paying for things that don't actually lead to a significant change in employment outcome. And so one of them kind of blames the people themselves, one of them blames the system. My take is that a lot of it starts with the parents and how you're raised, and that there are so many well-meaning parents of disabled children who, instead of teaching them how to advocate, instead of teaching them how to navigate a world that is sighted, or that is hearing, or that is, walking, they are teaching their children that they're going to fight their battles for them. So they do a whole lot of advocating. Some of these people they fiercely love their children. They really want what's best for them, and they will do whatever they can to provide that. But yet, if they don't teach those skills to the children that they have, those children have a rather rude wake-up call when they get into adulthood, and they have a false idea of how the world should be, and they don't have the skills themselves to navigate that world.
So helicoptering parents in general, I just think it's a bad approach. Or I think the term I've heard now is bulldozing parents, when the parents bulldoze all of the obstacles away from the children, because it doesn't teach the children resilience. It's just like, performance trophies at competitions where everybody gets a trophy, right? And it just completely devalues the experience of actually having received a trophy, but also the importance of the experience of wanting to have a trophy when you didn't get one. So I think I agree with you in that I think the most successful disabled people I know are the ones that have the most resilience and don't give up. And, I got lucky. My parents both went to graduate school. I mean, yeah, technically we were immigrants, but we were from Canada. I mean, it's practically next door. And I went to the very first year of school that was mainstreamed in Silicon Valley. So I did not go to a special class because of my mobility issues. And it was a year where a lot of disabled kids who did not have intellectual disabilities started going to regular school. Before that, they didn't. So I think those things have really played a significant role in my success, but also my desire to be overeducated as compared to everybody else, because I feel like education is kind of the great equalizer in that it's really hard to justify why you don't want somebody as qualified as I am in the room, right? And I think the biggest disservice a professional can do for a disabled child is to set low expectations. My very first IEP meeting with my daughter, they asked me what my goal was. She was in second grade at this point, and I'm like, well, everybody in my family has gone to college, she will go to college too. And the principal's response was, well, you can't know that. College is hard for people who are deaf. And I'm like, yeah, well, college was hard for, people who don't walk well, but I've still managed. So, and like I said, today she's got a professional degree, and she's one of the very few deaf audiologists in the US. So, it's just, don't tell me what I can't do, right? If I try it and I fail, I still learn from it. And that's true for any person with a disability, regardless of what their age is.
Oh my goodness, yes. I cannot agree more. So my second daughter, she was born with a condition called Dandy Walker malformation, which is a brain malformation. She basically is missing almost the entire cerebellum, which is the part of the brain that controls motor function, balance, movement. And I had several medical professionals tell me when she was born that she was going to be a vegetable, that she would never talk, never walk, never recognize us, never laugh, never smile. And it was a lot of talking about what she was never going to do. When I first met her neurosurgeon that put her VP shunt in for hydrocephalus, he told me, don't listen to what any of them are saying. She's going to write her own story. I have a patient with this condition who is in medical school. And that was all it took for me as a parent to give her everything I could do all the early intervention, do all the advocacy, because she deserved that chance to write her own story. So, speaking of writing our own stories, you have a book that's coming out on May 6th, I believe. Would you like to talk a little bit about that book and your contributions to it and what it's all about?
Sure. So I worked on a book with 38 other authors. So it was written by numerous people, each one of us, or sometimes a pair of us, taking a chapter in this overall framework. And it's called Digital Accessibility Ethics. And then the subtitle is Disability Inclusion in All Things Tech. So it doesn't talk so much about accessibility standards as it does looking at disability inclusion through the lens of being an ethical company or being an ethical person. And so I wrote the chapter on procurement, which is fairly early on in the book because, pretty much everything a company does with respect to accessibility starts with procurement. Are you procuring accessible tools? Because if you're not, then you're making it difficult to hire people with disabilities. And if you're making it difficult for them, then your accessibility output is going to be less good, basically. So that is coming. The three editors of the book are very well known and very well respected in the accessibility space. It's Lainey Feingold. So this is her second book. Her first book was on her structured negotiation. So that was more of a legal book. This is more of an ethical book. I have a second book that's coming out on GAD, which is going to be a book on Title II accessibility concerns. It is going to be kind of a compendium of a lot of the blogs that I've written on this topic over the last couple of years. I think I have something like 400 blog articles in my archive right now because I've been blogging about once a week for the last 8 years. So that will be talking about, okay, Title II people, you got an extra year to get compliant. This is what you need to be doing with that year.
I love that so much since we actually just had an episode about the title compliant and how it was changed to 2027, 2028. So I think any of our listeners who are listening in and tuning into us would receive immense value from reading that book in particular.
I don't know that we've decided where to put it on the website yet, but if you go to the homepage, there will probably be a link to it. And also you can read all of my blogs on the blog section of accessibilityofficer.com.
I have one question for you about your blogs. You mentioned you've been blogging for about 8 years. Have you ever gone back? And so I do this all the time. I'm my own worst self-critic. Have you ever gone back and been like, wow, what was I thinking when I wrote that? Or are you just like, man, that was brilliant?
More often than not, I go back and say, wow, this is really out of date. I need to update that.
Gotcha. Okay.
I try not to critique my own writing style too much. I do write fairly quickly, which is not the norm. I realize a lot of people, angst a lot about the blogs. But when people are listening to this and they go, wow, that's not possible. She couldn't have written that much. Well, you know what? Most of it was actually before generative AI even existed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I have gone back and updated articles. Usually what'll happen is somebody will ping me with a question on LinkedIn, which is my primary form of social media, and I will go digging for the article to give them the link to it. And then I'll look at the article and I'm like, yeah, this needs to be updated. I missed this, or that happened since then, or, oh, the Domino's case isn't in here or whatever. So yeah, I do the important ones, the ones that get a lot of traction. I do go back and update them from time to time.
Awesome. Well, as we start towards the end of our interview today, Sheri, is there any piece of advice you'd give to any of our listeners who are tuning in with us? We have probably people who are in the digital accessibility space, from prospective testers to current testers to people who just want to learn more about what it is that digital accessibility even is. So do you have any nuggets of wisdom you'd like to pass on?
So I would say for accessibility testers, probably 25% or less of the knowledge that you need to do your job is actually accessibility specific. 75% of it is, can you write? Can you budget? Can you make a good business case for something? And so I think looking at improving those skills make accessibility testers much more well-rounded and makes them a more valuable contributor to their organization.
I love that.
I love it too. I have a question. So I think the three main things that I've learned during my time in digital accessibility is that it's a field where you are always learning because it is ever evolving. It's a world where perspective is everything, and where thinking outside the box is a huge component. So the majority of the people who work for our company, for Accessibility Officer, are visually impaired. Many of us are screen reader users. You have a different disability from the majority of us and have worked for several bigger corporations and such doing accessibility work. What have you learned in your time with us, working with a bunch of blind people who some of us use screen readers, some of us use magnifiers, but a disability that's different from your own?
So I have worked with a number of blind people in the past. It's not the first time that I've done that. I think if I look back to when I first started working with a large number of blind people, it would have been in about 2015. The thing that I didn't know is I didn't understand how people who are blind process data. I knew how to use a screen reader, but I didn't understand how a blind person used a screen reader, because those two things are not the same. I mean, there's some overlap, but it took me a while to figure that out about what the strategies were for looking for headings or getting through tables or just things of that nature. But I also learned that little things make a really big difference. So we were doing a UX study. I'm not going to name the employer. I'll just say it was one of the earlier ordering food to be delivered through Uber Eats. And so we got through the study. And of course, at the end of every UX study, the person who's moderating it always says, okay, is there anything else you'd like to tell us? And it's kind of a lot of times thought of as sort of a throwaway sort of question. But the person that I was speaking with said, yeah, you know what? I miss being able to play Monopoly, and the game that this employer had. And then we started asking the other people, did you ever play Monopoly when you were still sighted? Most of the people that we were working with had acquired vision loss, not congenital. And they were like, oh yeah, it was so exciting when you used to be able to hold that piece in your hand and go, oh, maybe I'm going to win the $1 million. It's kind of like a lottery ticket. And so the outcome was, yeah, the ordering experience for delivering food was fine, but people wanted to be able to play Monopoly, and so we made Monopoly accessible. And so it's those little things that I think I'm the most proud of from my accessibility career.
Right, making the connection between the product and the people, right, the users.
Yeah.
And really understanding that just running an automation scan is only going to find a bare minimum of issues. The only way that you're going to really judge if something is truly accessible is if you put yourself into the shoes of that user and experience it based on the way that they would.
Definitely. But with all of the all of the collateral damage that goes with it, right? Because we're tired, because we have a headache, because we've been staring at blurry text all day. Or in my case, if you've heard my insulin pump beeping, my blood sugar is up, which makes me a little bit cranky sometimes. So you can't look at disability as a silo. The whole thing is just a completely intersectional experience, and most product owners don't look at it intersectionally. They just look at it as, oh, we have to make it work for screen reader users. They don't ask, well, why is the person using a screen reader? When did they develop the need to use a screen reader? How experienced are they with that screen reader? And all the other questions that goes into how that individual interacts with the product.
Absolutely. Because two different screen reader users can have two totally separate skill sets. Or even just two screen readers are totally different. Take JAWS and VoiceOver, totally different experiences.
Exactly. Nothing is monolithic in disability.
Absolutely. Well, Sheri, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you choosing to join us today. If you are one of our listeners, we are so incredibly thankful that you're here, that you've taken your time to tune into us. Make sure you check out Sheri's books. I totally am. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to read Sheri's backlog of blog posts and also her book that she's authoring with the other authors in the digital accessibility space. Because if we're here, we're trying to round ourselves out. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways, is that digital accessibility is more than just, do you know web content accessibility guidelines? It's how to incorporate that into communicating with developers who know nothing about disabilities and with other companies who know nothing about disabilities, and this lived experience, to making sure that their products are built with disability in mind from the ground up, rather than being an afterthought as it so commonly is. So thank you so much.
Web content accessibility guidelines are a compliance floor. If you're using it for anything else other than that, you're using it wrong. And I'm speaking both as, a person with a disability and somebody who works on developing those guidelines. If you're coming at accessibility from a place of disability inclusion and ethics, the accessibility will happen automatically.
Absolutely. Ellie, any last nuggets of wisdom? You have been ending our podcast with little Ellie pieces of knowledge and words to our listeners.
Okay, Ellie's nuggets of wisdom. People, when you have the privilege, because it is a privilege, working with people who have experience in the field in which you're working, it doesn't matter whether it's digital accessibility or another career, it very much behooves you to pay attention to those people who have come before you and who have accumulated all that experience and all that knowledge, because having mentors like Sheri is such a valuable asset to have, and you absolutely should take full advantage of their presence in your life, because they can absolutely change the trajectory of yours. Let their knowledge help you pave your own way.
And my nugget is, technology is easy, people are hard.
Oh, I love so much.
Focus on the people, because that's the bigger challenge when you're trying to get a culture to be accessible.
And I have no wisdom to share. But thank you guys so much for joining. We are really appreciative, and tune in next time. Thank you. Spill the tea on digital accessibility.
Subscribe to the WCAT WCAT podcast on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Links below.